let's hop right into it, giving it a couple more give some time for people to join. So thank you again for taking time this afternoon to join us for another edition of Hack the Hiring Process from Military to Cybersecurity. Today we're going to be focused on helping transitioning service members, both active and retired. Our focus is to really give you the tools to be able to succeed, especially as you start to navigate your transition. I know for me personally, in my transition, I spent about a week in SEPs and TAPS or whatever they call it now, and we had some old retired vets come in and give us a quick class on how to do a resume, but really he just talked about his experience in the military. So for me, being able to write resumes, being able to prepare myself was really short, and I think that can always be improved, which is the reason why we decided to do this webinar. So just a couple, as I was doing some research, just a couple things that I saw that was really eye-opening to me. Number one is, according to the Government Accountability Office, nearly 200,000 service members transition to civilian life every year. That is insane. I had no idea that the number was so high. But don't worry, there's good news. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, information security analyst roles is expected to grow 29% from 2024 to 2034. So we have a lot of room for roles in security, and that is really good news if you're looking for an opportunity in security. So without further ado, my name is March, and I'll be your host today. I'm the technical recruiter for Spectre Ops. Spent over 20 years in the Marine Corps. Started off as infantry, and then decided that I couldn't keep up with the young guys anymore, and so went into recruiting and spent the last nearly 10 or 11 years in recruiting. Then once I got out, joined some pretty cool companies, and now I'm here at Spectre Ops in even better company. So let's talk a little bit about the overview. So I do an introduction to the panel, let them introduce themselves. Then we'll go into some panel questions that I've prepared, and then questions from the audience, and then we'll close up. And we'll be at about an hour, give or take, depending on how many questions that we do have. Um, Without further ado, let's get right into the panelists. Uh, so we'll just go from Josh and then move our way down to Antero. But if you could just tell me a little bit about yourself, the branch, what was your MOS, and then what you do at Spectre Ops. So go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Joshua Prager. I got my start in the U.S. Navy back in 2009. I started off as a IT, worked ADP radioman on a couple ships. I did the USS Nassau and the CVN 69 USS Dwight D. Eisenhower. Did a couple of deployments. And while I was on that first deployment, I kind of got my first introduction to what a red team was when the ship I was on was being red teamed at the time. I was in like kind of the ADP defensive perspective of that engagement. And at the time I thought, this is really cool. I eventually want to do this as well. My orders after that were with Nyack Norfolk, which housed the Navy Red Team at the time. And so for my short command, I managed a lot of the network operations for the Navy Red Team. Learned a whole lot about network engineering, sysadmin infrastructure. And then I did one of those situations where, I left in uniform on Friday and I came back in as a contractor in suit and tie on Monday. Did that for a little while. Then eventually I jumped in with In-Game Systems, the threat hunting company that eventually became Elastic Security. Worked with them for a good bit, and then I found my way over to Spectre Ops, doing mainly defensive work. I'm a managing consultant over here now, but I still primarily do a lot of defensive program dev, detection engineering, threat hunting, things like that. I'll go ahead and give it over to Matt Merrill.
How you doing, everyone? Glad to see you all join us. I am Matt Merrill. I am also a Navy veteran. I did 8 years in the service. My primary rate was CTN, so it's no longer called a CTN. That actually got discontinued, I think, like a few years ago. Now it's like a CWT. My background in the military was primarily offensive, so I actually worked with Josh at his Nyack Norfolk Navy Red Team. So I was at Navy Red Team,
Oh,
doing a lot of offensive red teaming, doing pen tests. He was actually one of the primary support guys for us. So Worked with him for a lot. From there, I moved over to a more of like a defensive position. So I moved over to a place where I was doing media and malware analysis. So we were actually getting sent forward abroad to do like some kind of commands where we're doing incident response, doing some more dead box forensics, and doing malware analysis on any of the stuff that we find there, writing reports over there. That was all primarily like intelligence driven. From there, I came over to here. Now I'm a managing consultant here at Spectre Ops. Been here for about 5 years. And then I primarily do more offensive related assessments slash oversight. And I'll push over to Lance.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello, all. My name's Lance Kane. I'm a service architect with Spectre Ops. Similar to March, I started off in the Marine Corps, spent a little over 10 years serving the country. I also started in the infantry as an 0311 and eventually made some lat moves once I deployed and broke down my body a bit to start doing a little bit more thinking, a little less hiking, and made it into 1721 as a defensive cyber operator. And I was eventually recruited to the Marine Corps Red Team, where I spent a little over 5 years working with them. That was where I decided to make the transition out of the military and into the first Civ Div,
Mhm.
enjoying life with Spectre Ops now for about 3 years. Working as a service architect, a lot of my focus is on tradecraft development and being able to find new research, different types of payloads, and being able to serve as a technical reference to our consultants if they hit any hurdles or if they have to push over a certain roadblock during their assessments, whether defensive or offensive. And in addition to that, I tend to do a lot of the tech challenge reviews as well as technical interviews whenever we're handling new candidates throughout our hiring pipeline. So with that, I'll go ahead and pass it on over to Antero.
Hey, I'm Antero Guy. I'm a senior consultant with Spectre Ops. I've been here for about 2 years, and I primarily focus either on pen testing, tool development, or red teaming. Before Spectre Ops, I worked at 6gen doing pen testing as well for about 2 years, and before that, I was in the military as well. So I was in the military for 4 years as a 17 Alpha Cyber, and I spent those 4 years mainly on the defensive side, working at the Cyber Protection Brigade. And I was actually there working right alongside Brooke Robinson, who's also in this chat. So it's cool to see. But yeah, that's myself.
Awesome. And Tara, you're in the Army, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, okay. We try to get some Air Force in, so I apologize. We're heavy in the Department of the Navy this time, but it's okay. We've got some great information moving forward. Okay, so let's go into the next slide. We'll get right into the questions. And so the first question I have for Josh is transitioning from military can be challenging. What should I expect as a service member looking for a career in security or cybersecurity?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say one of the biggest things that you can prepare for once you transition from the military into a career with cybersecurity is that in the military, typically you are tasked very specifically. You have standard operating procedures for just about everything, and you may have a very, very small piece of the overall defense in depth picture. Whether you're doing like offensive validation with red teaming or pen testing, whether you're doing vulnerability management, or maybe you're just like IT help desk sysadmin work. You're doing one very, very small piece of a very, very large operation. Once you transition into the civilian sector, you'll notice that the name of the game is budget, and people tend to do a lot with significantly less resources. So you may find yourself wearing a lot of different hats, which isn't super different from the expectations you had in the military. Um, but whereas you were just a distinct part of a overall operation, you can very easily find yourself in a position where you are cross-functionally working with multiple different departments in cybersecurity, doing literally different things on Monday and Tuesday than you're doing on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So that's just, I think, a pretty obvious expectation once you move into cybersecurity in the civilian workforce.
Okay. I appreciate that. And I know that, when I speak with individuals that are looking to transition out of the military and looking for a role in whether it's Spectre Ops or some of the other companies, what can be an expectation of like leveling? Can you talk a little bit about that, Matt?
Yeah, for sure. So I would say in the military, you probably have maybe the expectation that you are a higher position. So like if you're working at a higher caliber, that you're kind of doing more of like a, let's say a SOC management role in the military. When you come into the civilian world, those I'm gonna say expectations might not be at the same level as like a normal corporate or civilian position. So I would kind of have the expectation of not necessarily looking for maybe like a higher principal or a higher management level position that you might not actually be qualified for. So I would say, like Josh said, you are very, I'm going to say, targeted and detailed and work on a smaller project. So I would definitely try to focus on identifying jobs or positions where it has that as like the primary role and maybe not necessarily trying to hit a higher principal. So when I came out of the military, I was definitely like an ops manager. And when I came out of the military, I was not qualified for an ops manager in the civilian world from my personal perspective. So kind of having that expectation that you might need to kind of come down to a different level. Other things I would say is some of the things that from the military, you're obviously coming out as a, older than a college individual, and you also have some more discipline associated to you. So I would also emphasize that when you're looking for another position as well.
Okay. Okay. Lance or Antero, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would also recommend being prepared to speak to your experience as a military member in what are civilian terms. It's not as easy for hiring managers that may have never had any type of military experience to translate an awk field or MOS value over to what that actually means. So finding some way to show how your skills translate can help you understand where to set those levels and like what positions you might equate to if you do a little bit of research. That was a big piece in my transition was going from like an engineering cell lead and member to finding out what would be an appropriate role, whether coming to SpectreOps for consulting at a senior or mid-level, or finding out what even an associate consultant meant. Because like in the military, we didn't have associate anything. So trying to understand
Yeah.
what those levels are when you're trying to apply for a position.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Antero?
So I agree with everything everyone said. But something that really helped me transition from the military to the civilian life was taking advantage of the Career Skills Program, so CSP. Essentially, many of you may be familiar with this, but a couple months out of your departure date, you can uh, acquire an internship with an external company, and the military will pay for it. And so I kind of utilized that to my advantage to get an internship with the company, and they kind of helped with that transition from military to civilian life. And it's definitely something I recommend looking into. It's also a really great way to adapt your skills and also get hired on right after getting or transitioning out of the military.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I felt, especially when I was transitioning, was like the unknown, right? Because everything was so laid out for me in the military. I mean, I retired as a master sergeant, and so being up towards the top, not at the very very tip of the top, but everything was set up, and being able to navigate through resumes and interviews and different companies and what really matched was really really challenging for me. And so being able to have this type of experience to help for somebody to get back on and really do their research and look for different types of tools and resources is really helpful. So I appreciate that. Okay, let's go into question two. I do see some questions in the Q&A, and we'll get to those here shortly, but let's go to question two. So Matt, considering your journey from the military, what was the most challenging aspect of landing your first role?
For me, it wasn't necessarily a very challenging perspective because I was prepared. I was actually preparing to leave the military almost a year before my AOS. So
Mm.
it just comes down to your preparedness, right? So one of the things that really paid off for me was like actually building my network, having my resume drafted, not before I took TAPS. And kind of some of your expectations when you are looking for that civilian position is a lot of the companies that I've seen recently are doing a very vigorous interviewing process. Like our interview process is pretty vigorous as well. And we're not just critiquing or looking for individuals on like a technical aspect, but we're also looking on more of like a character or personality aspect as well.
Mhm.
So kind of be prepared for those, interview situations where you're going to be challenged at a very vigorous interviewing process at a technical level and at your character and how your personality is. So for our interview process, companies aren't just looking at who the best technical fit is. We're also looking at who fits into your culture, and kind of just having that expectation. So for me, like I said, preparation really paid off for me, being prepared for that and kind of just going through those, exercises on getting yourself as ready as you can for those interviews.
Appreciate that, Matt. I was definitely winging it when I was trying to get out, and I don't know if anybody else has that process. I was joking with my wife, like, hey, for schoolwork, just wing it. I was so good at it, but that is definitely not the case. Josh, Antero, or Lance, you have anything to add when it comes to this?
Yeah, for the challenging aspect of getting out of the military, one of the things that I found that was a little bit difficult was actually landing what I would consider like a good role, like a role that really valued me as a member. Um, because I had a clearance, right? And because I had, touched Metasploit frequently, that typically for a lot of contract positions was like the bare minimum bar to entry. They would literally ask you, like, do you have a clearance? Great. Did you touch Metasploit? Also awesome. You got the job. And that didn't feel good. It didn't feel like I was valued. It didn't feel like a secure position. It just kind of felt like a band-aid over a gaping wound of a suspicious contract. So it does definitely take a little bit of time to find a position where you feel valued not only for your technical expertise and your experience, but also your personality type and kind of like your get it done attitude that you gain from the military, that structured mentality that you have from the military. It's not necessarily something you can just apply for and jam into a cover letter. A lot of times you won't really know it's one of those kind of fishy contracting positions until you have sit down with that initial interview and you have some conversations with the folks.
Yeah, I'd kind of like to echo that sentiment. Similar to how we like to evaluate the whole person when we're looking at our candidates, I would say it's critical to look at the organizations that you're interviewing with and be evaluating them throughout that process as well. Because I can recall I was in the fortunate position whenever I was transitioning that I got multiple job offers, but when I actually looked and read through the job offers and what some of those requirements were, as far as like hours or like some of them were, hey, you're going to be working by yourself, expected to handle this many clients, siloed off essentially. That was far less appealing than necessarily like at our company where you have actual support or we care about quality of life and like trying to balance things for people. Because I knew that as I was making my transition out of the military, I was looking to improve my quality of life and have more flexibility and free time with my family, not necessarily less or be going into a paid position that might pay well, but losing all that time and energy and stress that comes with something like that.
One thing that I would kind of add to the whole interview process is I was given this advice on my transition out was go interview for a company that you might not necessarily be too involved into the position just to get all of the practice runs before you actually interview for the job that you really want. So I thought that was really insightful and helpful. So like I actually did a couple interviews previously before that I kind of, maybe stumbled upon myself or like stumbled over myself talking things like that so that when I was prepared for the actual interview that I was interested in, I was more, professional and, really good.
I agree with all that. When it came to interviewing for like 6th Gen or Spectre Ops, especially when I was first coming out of the military, I studied a lot. So I read every blog post I could get my hands on, challenged myself with questions, and then I had my wife and friends interview me like 5, 10 times for the interviews. So I kind of see like prepping for job interviews as the same for like prepping for an exam.
Yeah, and especially on the recruiting side, we love to see when somebody does their preparation on the company. And I was similar to Antero. Like I watched a ton of blogs, or I'm sorry, not watched blogs, but I watched a ton of YouTube videos, read some blogs, and was really interested when I first started, when I first applied for SpectreOps, and the values of what, the company is about, right? Humility was a huge part of for me, and we always talk about it on our website. No egos, egos need not apply, and that's a huge thing for me, because all of us have been into the military, and we understand that sometimes the military culture can breed its a specific type of uh, um, um, like environment, and sometimes those environments aren't always the best when it comes to your personality and may not match. And so being able to do your research and understanding that about the different companies was huge. And I did, same as everybody else, I interviewed with some companies that I thought, may not be the best fit for me, but would be a good fit for some of the, like a practice interview or something like that. Although I will say that sometimes recruiters do not like that, but there's definitely opportunities out there, like Hiring Our Heroes, that gives you opportunities to be able to practice and network with other people. So yeah, it's great insight. Anybody else want to add anything to that before we move into the next one? No? Okay. All right. Question 3. We'll go with Lance. Service members go through a week of transitioning classes, which I alluded to before. Most have not written a resume in some time. What should a resume include when looking for a role in security?
Yeah, that's a great question. I typically love perusing resumes before I go over and look at candidates' tech challenges, submissions, or if we're going into any of those technical interviews, just to get an insight into what their background is. So, a key piece throughout this process is being able to convey the information on your experience, proficiencies, skill sets, certifications, all those help, but in a concise format. I will say when I encounter a resume that's going on like 4 or 5 pages and they have essentially written an essay about themselves, it makes it a little bit harder to discern what the actual valuable pieces are there. So doing a bit more in giving a brief introduction of who you are, kind of like an about statement, I'd say like 2 or 3 sentences, and then giving bullet points or like synopsis of responsibilities, roles, any other type of work or valuable items you may have been able to perform. Specifically, we're talking about cybersecurity. I love seeing people that have contributed to open source projects and like when they developed certain agents with like Mythic or something else like that, or if they have conducted so many assessments, those are actually like easily recognizable statements that I can start associating. Hey, this individual's handled at least this many types of client assessments, whether inside the DoD or in other work experience. And being able to break things out to look at, hey, here's their education section. I know whether they have a college degree or not, what that focus might be, as well as any type of certifications, additional DoD training or knowledge. If I can go and search that course publicly and get some insights into what may have been taught there, that's another great added benefit. But the key thing is making sure you can do most of this concisely. Like try to hit that 1 page, if need be, maybe a 2 page mark whenever you're building your resume initially.
Yeah, to kind of add on to that for the focus on the resume. I think TAPS it was a great class. I really enjoyed it. And I remember my TAPS instructor told me or told everybody that people will often say a successful transition out of the military. It's like it's binary. It's 0 1. Either you're in the military or you transitioned out. There's no such thing as successful or unsuccessful. The transition is going to happen no matter what, and you just have to best facilitate that path to a goal that you want. But one thing that I would say that I mean, I look through resumes all the time because I'm part of the hiring pipeline here, and one thing that no one informed me about when I was in TAPS that I think is really valuable and that I really appreciate seeing on resumes is a list of courses that individual has taken. Um, I know everyone's quick to put their certifications on their, degrees or a must-have on there, of course, but a list of courses that you've taken, I think are really valuable. In the military, we go through lots of different training, um, and obviously tune those courses to be applicable to the position you're hiring for. If you've in the military, everyone gets like deck handling as a skill course in the Navy. If that's not applicable to cybersecurity, please don't put deck handling on your resume. But a lot of ITs in the Navy go through a what's called 2791. It's a technical C school, but it translates to like an intermediate sysadmin school. That's valuable to put on your resume that you have taken a intermediate sysadministrator course. Put that on your resume. If you've taken any conference classes, it doesn't matter if you got a certificate or not from that class. If you've taken some sort of black hat class or something like that, put that information on your resume because it's very, very valuable. It at least lets me know you have a baseline level of knowledge in that particular course area.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned tailoring the resume to bring out what has value or what's going to be most applicable to the job position. Because that was a big piece when I was building my resume out. I found out that 4 or so years of infantry work wasn't necessarily the type of experience I wanted to be highlighting when I was applying for all these different cybersecurity and technology positions. So making sure that you are including segments for whatever position or job you're applying for that help display expertise you can bring to that job is a big must and super critical when you're building out that resume.
Matt, were you gonna add? I know that you went off mute.
Yes, I wasn't sure if Antero had anything to add, but kind of like to talk to what Lance was talking about. I normally, when I look at like a job rec that I'm looking at applying for, I try to take my experiences that directly align to maybe a line item on the job rec and try to highlight that over other things. So if you have something that directly correlates to the job rec or the job description, try to highlight those over anything else, right? Like I said, tailor your resume to kind of fit the position itself. Another thing I wanted to highlight, which was I actually got corrected on one of my interviews when I was transitioning. During the interview, I used we a lot because you're conditioned in the military, like you are a team, you
Mm.
use we a lot. But a lot of times on that interview directly, I was actually corrected like, so you said we did this, but what did you actually do? So definitely make sure that you focus on what you did to the team. So like if you did like a penetration test and you identified a vulnerability that led to a CVE, and you said we did this, what did you do to identify that, that vulnerability? Did you identify it? Did you write a POC? Did you write the CVE? What was it? So definitely try to highlight what you did, and then that's kind of something that it's definitely a transition period to move away from that we to like what you did. For me, it was at least.
And Taro, do you have anything?
Um, I mean, I agree a lot with what Matt Merrill said. I tailored my resume towards every single business I was interviewing with. So I maybe had like 10, 15 different resumes, just with slight changes. Uh, and then, when it comes to like the bullets for everything you've done, I tried to make as many bullets that were quantitative and demonstrate an impact as much as I could. So it was very similar to me to writing an OER.
Yeah. So speaking of resumes, how do you feel about, awards like a National Defense Award on a resume? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it goes back to what Josh said, if it's applicable or not, right? So I was told, like adding that you're a military veteran and everything like that definitely adds value to your resume. But definitely make sure that your awards are applicable. That's kind of my thought process on it. For my perspective, though, if you do get like maybe like a JCOM or like a higher achievement award, then definitely put that in there. That if it's a bigger achievement, then sure, I would say I would definitely agree. Um, but something that is just awarded to you for entering the military might not be
Yeah,
applicable.
I would put like was awarded, due to whatever X thing that you did. I wouldn't necessarily put like, your good conduct medal on there because that might raise questions like, would you not normally have good conduct in the workplace? So like if you're awarded like something like a NAM or a JCOM or something like that, definitely maybe just say award provided due to whatever thing that you did.
Yeah, definitely those individual contribution ones or like individual awards would be useful to have on there. And I know that when I see those, I like to start off with a nice icebreaker of like, okay, tell me more about this award that you got. But if you're gonna sit there and put a national defense on there or something that's just kind of handed out there, I'm gonna be like, okay, tell me more about how you got your national defense, and we'll see how that conversation really goes. So.
Yeah, obviously that's a little bit of satire, but when it comes to like the awards, being able to explain the award and how you were able to do it, I think that provides a lot more value than putting whatever award that it is on there. As a matter of fact, I was told to remove the awards when I was going through my transitioning classes. Like, employers aren't gonna ask. Maybe that's something that I would ask somebody if I was looking at their resume and they had, some awards on there, maybe a combat action ribbon or whatever the case may be. That may be like an icebreaker for me. But for some of the recruiters out there, they may not understand that, and they may not, it just may be extra time or extra space that you're taking away. So awesome. Anybody else have anything to add before we go into the next question?
We could probably answer two of the questions in the Q&A. Kind of correlates directly to what we're talking about right now.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
So one of the questions is like kind of correlate to what helps you the most technically to stand out to Spectre Ops. As an interviewer and someone that goes through the actual resumes and the tech challenges, everything that we push out, some of the things that I like to identify is kind of like something that Lance already stated, which is your actual if you have like any projects that you contributed to, if you have any open source projects, things like that transitioning from military to civilian side, if you don't have like a degree or a certification, definitely try to, I'm gonna say, write a bullet point that's going to capture all of your experiences towards that. But we definitely like to look for something that's going to capture, like, did you do CRTO? Did you do OSCP? Things like that. So we have a base understanding of where we're expecting your knowledge to be at. And then for the most part, like I said, projects, pet projects, something that you're actually researching, something that you're passionate about, something like that that we can actually kind of talk through during the interview. That is one of the things that we primarily look for, at least for me. So.
Yeah, good question. Good question.
Yeah, and
Anybody else?
something that always stands out to me on interviews is when a lot of times we'll talk through offensive tradecraft. And what I'm really interested in is like fundamental knowledge on how that tradecraft works. But that's all over. But also something that really stands out to me is when we're talking about tradecraft, when the interviewee brings up OPSEC concerns or considerations, because it shows that they're considering, okay, is this going to get me detected or caught before I perform this action, and things of that nature. And so that's something that always stands out to me.
Yeah, the other question was, I think that you're alluding to this, Matt, was do you believe that making long stretches for experience translating from the military to cybersecurity is good for a resume? So an example that they provided would be infantry starting that the, wait, I'm sorry, an example would be infantry stating that the role translates to the ability to the ability to lead groups of people in high stress situations. So does that and I think I understand what the question is, translating your military skills, how much is too much of a stretch, right? Where it's almost like you're fabricating your experience.
Yeah, I would definitely say if you can be creative with it and capture something that's within the job description, definitely put it in there. Like one of the examples would be like if you did a volunteer event, that could be like community involvement, something like that. If you're looking at a job rec that's associated to like management and you don't necessarily have direct management experience, but you did some kind of event that you led a bunch of people, that might be something to highlight as well. I'm not sure if anyone else has anything to add to that.
Yeah, I would say the other piece to that is when you're making those translations, you're the one creating this content. So be able to speak to what you put in your resume. Like if you can speak intelligently to like how this bullet point on leading people translates to managerial experience or how you may be able to function in a high stress environment with deadlines. Obviously, infantry is a little bit different than some of the deadlines you might hit in the civilian sector. But if you can actually speak to that and that's on your resume whenever it gets brought up, you're not only going to be providing value from what they just initially read, but expounding upon that and building yourself out as a more qualified individual.
I would add to one of the things that Lance just stated. You're the one writing the bullet, so you should be able to talk to the bullet. We've had multiple interviews where we ask an individual, "Hey, what does this bullet mean?" And they're like, "Oh, I don't know. Let me go back and look." And they're like, I didn't write that bullet." So that's a clear red flag to me on an interview. We've had multiple interviews where we kind of so in some sense caught the person utilizing like an LLM to generate some of their resume bullets, and they can't talk to it. So definitely make sure you can talk to every bullet in your resume.
Yeah, good point. 100%, especially from the recruiting side. Awesome. Okay, so let's move on to the next question that we have. Question 4 is, in preparation for transition. I know we've talked a little bit about this and hinted at this, but in preparation for transitioning from the military, do you feel you have any recommendations? Do you have any recommendations on timelines, certifications, trainings? What do you feel is most beneficial? I'll throw this at Antero.
Absolutely. So I was kind of in the same boat as Matt Merrill. I began my preparation about a year in advance. I knew I was going to be getting out pretty early. And so when I did that, I started looking at trainings, and there are a couple trainings or certificates that I believe are valuable within the offensive security field. One is the CRTO and CRTO2 courses. I believe those are excellent certificates when it comes to Active Directory, red teaming. It introduces you into like the fundamentals of Active Directory protocols and like how penetration testers typically have used them. And so those are great certificates. I think OSCP also is a pretty good certificate. It requires a lot of work, and so it kind of just demonstrates to the workforce that you're willing and to put in the work in order to further educate yourself and things of that nature. So I definitely think those are good certs. But really, any certification within this field, I think, demonstrates value, even if it's not looked at as favorably as other certificates. I think everything demonstrates value when it demonstrates that you're willing to self-learn and self-educate yourself on technical matters. Besides that, I'll hand it off to one of the other guys.
I know we hit on it a little bit, but does anybody have anything else to add to it?
One thing I think is really, really important, and like for a timeline perspective, ideally you kind of want to start this a little bit earlier than a year out. Um, but making connections. I know, if you've done any kind of like transition military class, you already know they really, really harp on making connections, building relationships. And the reason they do that is because it's the truth. Like you can apply at 1,500 positions and you can adapt your resume to every one of 1,500 positions. And it's going to literally be, your best bud who got out of the military and works at, so-and-so place that lands you your life-changing job just because they reach out to you on text messages and say, "Hey, do you want a job here?" Um, those connections are very, very, very important. Those relationships that you make are very, very important, and you kind of have to have an open mind as well. So just because, maybe you're in a position in the military where you're not directly working with red team or Von management or IA or even IT, but you are working around these people. There's nothing stopping you from basically getting like on the job experience and working with these people and asking for opportunities to work with these people and kind of learn how they do their job and make those connections because those connections are very, very important once you get out of the military.
Oh, good point. I think that that's a huge aspect of being able to prepare for your transition is doing those outreaches and just connecting with recruiters, connecting with people in the field that you want to go into. One of the best things that I did was I had a connection in Starbucks, and one of the questions that this individual asked me was, "Hey, March, what do you want to do when you get out of the military?" And I'm like, "I don't know, just stuff." Which was not the right answer, by the way. You do need to have something, you need to understand what is it that you want to do after the military, and what are your goals, right? I think that's huge.
Yeah, I was trying very, very hard to find a good position to transition to once I got out of the military.
Yeah.
And you know, I would work with different contractors on different things, and I would stay late fixing their operations. And you know, it's 5, 6 p.m. You got the thing fixed. Everybody kind of goes and takes a break, and that's when I would try to make that connection. And I made a connection with someone who asked me like, well, what are you looking to do once you get out of the military? And I was like, I want to get to Texas because that's where I'm from and that's where I want to live. And they were like, oh yeah, I mean, if you're willing to do defensive stuff, we got hunters down there. And I didn't know what they meant. I mean, are you talking deer hunting? Like, what are you talking about? And they were talking about like threat hunting, defensive augmentation. And I didn't know that. But that literally led into my transition into the civilian sector. Just that simple conversation.
Yeah. Incredibly,
I'll say
incredibly.
I would add one more thing. Definitely, if you have the time still in service, take advantage of the programs that are offered to you. Some of them are not necessarily directly broadcast to everyone, like the Skill Bridge internships, or like for the Navy, it was Navy cool to actually pick up certifications. So I definitely took advantage of all of that while I was in. If I had, if you have the time, definitely try to take the advantage of those. But
Yeah. Awesome. So we'll move into the next question. Speaking of hiring our heroes, we're going to try and do something eventually with hiring our heroes to maybe get this opportunity out there for other people. So I'm just going to throw this question out there. Whoever wants to take this, I'm completely okay with you taking for. So what are the biggest differences between testing in the military and testing a Fortune 500 company? Can you tell me a little bit about client interaction and how they differ?
I would say difficulty. So in the military, being part of like a DoD red team, the commands difficulty wise was not as mature as a lot of these Fortune 500 companies that we've seen it from our clientele, right? So, and also the
Gosh.
personal like who is actually requesting the testing. So with
Sorry.
us, when we're working with our clients, they're requesting it for a particular reason, but a lot of the people you're working with on the DoD side, they're only like, yeah, we're here for compliance. We'll just disconnect from the internet if we get a cyber breach. Like that's a very real world thing that I've seen. So I would say having that, being in a more mature environment, going against a client that actually has a direct goal on what they're trying to accomplish, and actually working with them collaboratively to actually make their environment more secure is something that I've liked to see from like a Fortune 500 company.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll echo some of those sentiments from going from DoD to client environments. It's definitely a lot more challenging when you have well-funded organizations that have built out robust teams. It makes us come up with a lot of new tradecraft that eventually we like to blog about and post to the rest of the cybersecurity community as we find ways to get around some of these better defenses. But I will say what was a lot easier or a better experience, in my opinion, as far as client interactions is the companies that are in the civilian sector are paying for you to be there, whether you're hired on internally or if you're working as a consultancy and coming in to augment them, they want value coming out of this assessment and they are very receptive. I know that when I was in the military, it wasn't necessarily quite as friendly when we were like being told, okay, you're going to go conduct a covert red team against this command. And we go to read in like certain warrant officers that are just salty about, hey, I built this network, don't break my network. So, yeah, you get a lot of buy-in from your clients already and from the companies that you work for that want to continuously improve their posture instead of being in those compliance metrics like Matt mentioned.
Yeah, one thing I noticed as the big difference between the military and the Fortune 500, I kind of talked about it earlier, but like when you're in the military, it's a very distinct tasking, whether you're implementing STIGs or whether you're taking care of remediations in a CNA report, you're doing one very specific thing over this massive operation. The civilian sector, a lot of times, is the exact opposite. You get dropped in as a senior consultant or as a consultant. And you are very much expected to make miracles happen and completely fix all of detection and response overall for this entire organization. And it's unattainable. You have to very narrowly scope the work that you're going to do for each individual Fortune 500 client. And you have to be careful that you don't, promise them miracles, because there's only so much time, so much resources that you can commit to each contract. And so I would say like that's kind of the big one. You're not expected to do just one very small thing. You're typically expected to do a lot, and you have to be the one to kind of constrain that and still deliver what the customer is expecting.
So as to like the testing part, I can't differentiate too much. I was defensive orientated in the military and offensive orientated outside. I can speak to like the client interactions in the military. My job was very specific. You had um, a set of things you had to do, and it was typically delegated to you, and then you delegate stuff to other personnel. So you all kind of knew what you were doing. On the civilian side, I have a lot more flexibility, and so I interact with the customers a lot more. I get to decide what type of tasks I want to do a lot more, so you don't necessarily have to get approval for everything. There are things you have to get approval for, right? You can't just execute anything on a customer's environment, but um, yeah, I'd say there's a lot more flexibility and a lot more freedom of action on the civilian side.
I would agree. I would add to that. There's been many times on a red team engagement on the DoD side where I'm literally trying to recreate a tool that's open source, but I'm not allowed to use that tool that's open sourced. So that was definitely a difficulty.
Hmm.
Gotta love those ATOs.
All right. Appreciate the insight on that. I know that that's one of the things that I've really learned in my short amount of time here at SpectreOps is that military and civilian testing or engagements or anything like that is completely different. And so we've got to be aware of that. What was it like for you to be able to change how you speak to different clients coming from the military? Was it difficult?
See, we can't say that because then we admit that we weren't super professional in to begin with. There's that good conduct ribbon again, right?
Okay, fair enough, fair enough. All right, so let's go into the last question. Obviously, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about Spectre Ops, right? But we're a little bit biased. Why should somebody apply for a role with Spectre Ops?
Do you have a particular person you want to ask?
I'm just asking everybody.
All right, all right. I'll go first.
Okay.
All right. One of the things that is most important to me at SpectreOps is the fact that we have these core pillars, and we abide by them very, very closely. Our evaluations are based on these core pillars. Our expectation of behavior and interaction with clients are based on these core pillars. We have quite a few of them, but one of the ones that is most important to me is humility and empowerment through transparency. And I think honestly, a lot of times when you jam those two together, you get what outcomes camaraderie. You have this team where people are constantly trying to bring each other up, but also not afraid to like be direct and point out where people can grow. And then also with that empowerment through transparency, at SpectreOps, we are very, very open about all the research that we're doing, all the different collaborative efforts that we're doing. And we're not just trying to create camaraderie amongst ourselves. We are trying to create camaraderie with the entire community. We have like the Bloodhound gang. Andy and the Bloodhound team is constantly going out and doing different community events. Us in consulting services, we're constantly chatting with our clients one-on-one, even after an engagement's over. We are very much trying to build this camaraderie both internally and externally with the community as a whole.
I will say one of the biggest things I value with our company is the willingness to invest in our employees and their growth. I know that sometimes when I was living the military life, just trying to get to trainings was a little more than challenging. You'd sit there and be in a position where, oh, our unit doesn't have funding, or we didn't apply fast enough, so your package didn't make it through, didn't make one of the seats. Meanwhile, having joined Spectre Ops, I expressed an interest of like wanting to learn more about Mac OS because I did years of like Windows side, some of the Azure and cloud, etc. in my previous life. And with that being the case, SpectreOps was willing to like develop a whole training pipeline, which Matt on the call here actually contributed significantly to build out resources and allocate time like 6 to 8 weeks, if not longer, for myself and one other that were interested in becoming more proficient in something that the company needed for a skill set. And just continuing same payment, same type of investment and hours that we typically would throughout the work week, but allowing us to learn more about that and building out a whole pipeline. That was such a refreshing change to go from competing and hoping that you can get to trainings and hoping you have funding to an organization that is willing to allocate and dedicate time and resources to find new things for you to learn and become more proficient in.
I can add to that. So I would say, like Lance and Josh kind of already hinted on, we definitely try to build out that culture that we look for. Like we mentioned previously, we're not just looking at your technical skills, we're also looking at you as a, your character and your personality. So being that right person, actually, being a good addition to our culture and kind of having those core pillars, and just as a manager, from my perspective, giving you the freedom for you to grow in the career that you want to go in. So that is some of the things that I would say that I definitely like here at SpectreOps. In addition to that, we do have that difficulty, having those higher caliber clients and actually trying to, use that critical thinking and not just doing the same assessment over and over again. We've had multiple assessments where you need to take a different attack path or actually do something that is going to be a lot more challenging. So you can do that research and, continue to develop the community and kind of move the community forward.
Yeah, I'd say the caliber of people here is amazing. Everyone's very friendly, and so I find it very motivating that everyone's always trying to push their boundaries when it comes to uh, this career field. And so it helps yourself push your career boundaries and your technical knowledge. So definitely advocate. It's a really good place to work.
Yeah, I think we just won, medium-sized place to work recently, which is fantastic. And I'm gonna echo everything that everybody said. The pillars, but also, the culture. The culture is incredibly important to me, right? Being able to find people that don't judge you if you don't know the correct answer or you make a mistake. That is one of the things that I love about our company. Is that yes, can we make mistakes? Not everybody's perfect, right? As long as you don't make the same mistakes over and over, people are willing to support you. When I joined SpectreOps, like I didn't know what really how the company was set up. And I remember Robbie having a conversation with me and saying, hey, listen, if you look at SpectreOps and say, you've got the product side, so Bloodhound, Mythic, Merlin, etc., and a bunch of open source tools. And then you've got the services to include the training. And that was easy for me to understand that. Not because I was a Marine, but just because, it was easy for me to understand exactly what he was saying. But somebody at his high of a position just having a conversation with me was that's what I like, right? I don't want to feel like I'm beneath somebody. I want to feel like I can have a conversation with you without being looked down upon, which I'm sure everybody's experienced. Like you don't go to a commanding general and have a conversation about, the cool movie, right? You probably don't have that conversation. But we can have that conversation with our CEO, with our chief of staff. I mean, just amazing, awesome people, COO, etc. Just awesome place to be. No wonder why we won that. So, all right. So appreciate that. Does anybody have anything else to talk about when it comes to why somebody? Okay. Also, just I know that since we're talking about the military, we're talking about transitioning. One of the things I really like and enjoy is our military friendly environment as well. We have a lot of service members that have joined us in some form fashion, whether it be training, whether it be research and development, the product side, whatever the case may be. We have a good network to be able to support each other. As a matter of fact, we still do safety briefs on Friday every day or every week, which is pretty cool. It's something that we started up to build that camaraderie with each other. So yeah. All right. So the questions from the audience. So we're going to move into the portion that we got a few minutes left to answer some of the questions from the audience. So if you get a chance, you'd like us to answer some of the specific questions. We know that everybody's transition is completely different, so we can answer some of those. So the first one is famously, offensive security wants years of experience before you get a job that provides experience. To get a job that provides experience. Penetration test is well covered in the web for training. How would you suggest getting red team experience without getting a job as a red team?
I would say the main viewpoint I see on that is there are trainings like the CRTO, things like that. So if you can't directly work in the capacity of a red teamer, I would definitely try to hit up being more, one of those trainings, maybe potentially doing the CRTO. The main difference that I've identified with penetration testing and red teaming is just having that stealth requirement. So working on your OPSEC, working on your tradecraft, trying to execute things where you know what you're executing and you know what telemetry might be created that you might actually trigger a detection. Just kind of having that like that knowledge is going to go a long way when you do a red team.
Yeah, I'd second that. And like, even without going for specific certification trainings, you have like even our own RTO course for red team operations where we reveal tradecraft. And if you go through and find other organizations, I think like there's another one like Sector 7 that does more red teaming focus without necessarily having a full-on cert tied to it, but showing that you went through some of these trainings and got the knowledge. This at least builds a foundation to be able to apply for some of those maybe entry level to and depending on how proficient you are, maybe mid-level red teaming roles if you don't already have prior job experience.
Anyone else?
I was just going to say, and this one can kind of attribute to one of like the earlier questions we asked too. But a big part of stealth and OPSEC is understanding what the tool is doing underneath the hood. Um, I often, when I do offensive interviews, that's kind of what I'm looking for is, do you know what tool to use and when to use it? And do you know what it does under the hood? If you know when to use a tool, and like what purposes to use it for, that's great. And that's a great penetration testing mindset. But one of the big differentiators between a red teamer and a pen tester is actually knowing under the hood, what does this tool abuse? What technology is this tool going to touch and interact with? What event IDs is this tool going to generate when it's executed? You don't necessarily have to have that red team experience to be able to answer those kind of questions. That's just basic executing things in a lab and seeing what event IDs generate and taking a look at it from that perspective.
Appreciate that insight, Josh. Any other additions to that? All right. Well, it sounds like we've got all the questions answered, and I know that we're coming up on time. We actually are at time, so let's close this webinar out. A couple of resources that I have for the community. Obviously, we have our red team, Dwayne Michael, who originally is supposed to be on this, but had some travel requirements. But he posted a great blog with when it comes to like the process of joining SpecterOps, but to include, the life of SpecterOps. Definitely recommend that you read this, and we can send this out as well to everybody who has joined. But what I would say is, as a closing remarks, number one, I just want to thank everybody for taking time to be able to come out and chat with us and really get some tips and tricks to be able to help with the transition. As a forward-facing recruiter for SpecterOps, happy to be able to sit down and chat with individuals, because we know that the transition is specific and it will be based on your experience. But thank you to everybody from the panel for taking time. I know you guys are incredibly busy. I've seen the test schedule, and I know you guys are super busy with everything. So again, thank you, and we wish you luck.